It's a couple minutes past 6, so we're going to reconvene the library board meeting at this time. So the format of this, we'll have members of the public come up and ask the candidates questions that they have. When you come up, if you could please, there's a sheet there for you to print your name and identify yourself for the public record. I will note that, the board reserves the right to, cut comments short and things like that in the interest of time. With that, just a brief introduction of the candidates. On my left, your right, is Ms. Bush. In the center of the table is Ms. Zachariah, and on my right, your left, is Mr. Colgrove. So, with that, if any members of the public wish to ask questions, they can come forth at this time. Yeah. So like I said, please state your name for the record. Oh, no, you can do that after your question.
My name's Kathy McCormick. I am a Carson City resident. And I didn't hear a lot of talk in any of the answers, and the questions didn't specifically ask about your position on and experience with dealing with folks in the community who maybe simply don't have any other place to be during the hours the library is open. So, homeless or people with any number of other issues. And I'm just curious to know. I mean, I know that libraries take the position that we serve everyone, but just could you talk about how and your experience with that?
Any order?
Yeah, who goes first?
We move down the table. Okay. I think I spoke about a bit about at CalArts.
You did.
Yeah, we had some challenges in that way. And also at the Los Angeles Public Library, when I worked there, we had a large homeless population that would utilize the resources. I think in any event, the library is a public building, so we have to be open for all members of the community. It's just setting expectations and boundaries. And by that I mean, if someone is crossing a line as far as any rules that we would consider something that should not be allowed in the space, and for the safety of the other people using the library, then that's something that should be acted upon. But if they're just using the resources and sitting there, absolutely they should be able to use the library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe we could include staff training in dealing with issues as well.
Yes, and I think I spoke to that too, that I did that with my staff as far as, especially with mental health challenges. Uh-huh. And I believe it's really important to empower the staff to know what tools they have, what resources they have, to be able to enforce the rules of the library, but also provide the service. So there's no gray area. They kind of know what they can do and what they can't.
Yeah, I agree with sorry. Is it on? Yes. I agree with that all as well. The community, I think all libraries probably are dealing with homelessness as an issue. My community has that issue, and I live in New Hampshire. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I live in Vermont and work in New Hampshire, and on both sides of the Connecticut River, it's a big issue in the communities. And I do know that not only, it's not just libraries, there are laws. And some towns are being sued by how they respond to homeless. Immediately, it's in Brattleboro, Vermont, was sued. And so I do have to fall back on some of those, the rules and policies that your library had. But one thing, even if one thing that I wouldn't think, in any community, I think, no one can block the entrance to the library. So, that would be one thing, I think I read somewhere that was a complaint. You shouldn't, that would be something a staff member. And does take the training. You want to, and also you have to be compassionate. There is a man and he does, he's written a book for ALA about homelessness in libraries, and he also has a course that you could take, and Carson City might have done it actually, because I think that Niche Academy has a class in the Niche Academy, and we did that with our staff, and it's made a big difference. Plus, just making sure, I think people don't always know what's expected of them, that it's really okay for them to leave and go out and speak to something when something isn't appropriate. And sometimes it takes a while for change to happen. I know in our library, we also had an issue with smoking, and that was something that we had to actually pass an ordinance, because smoking is loud in public places in my town. And except for now, libraries have been added to that list of except for schools and hospitals. Now it's schools, hospitals, and libraries. But it took a long time.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd Colgrove, for the record. And I think, in addition to agreeing with what my colleagues have said already, and I might ask, was that Kleinenman's work, maybe Palaces for the People?
Well, it's
Or is the last ALA?
no, it's Ryan. His name is
Oh,
Ryan,
okay.
and there's a movie called The Public.
It was,
about
it
the
was derived
Cincinnati-
from Kleinenman's book, exactly,
Yeah,
which is a really a must-read. And when you were talking about that, I remembered the last part of the book that I talked about earlier, where the phrase is a culture of contempt, which is very appropriate when it comes to homelessness. For whatever reason, we seem to adopt this culture of contempt approach, which is difficult. But what makes it harder is that it's the role of the library director and the Board of Trustees to figure out how we're going to thread this needle, right? By default, we've responded saying the library is for everyone, and that means if they want to be here, they're here, and we'll just take care of them. But we'll also run into the same problem when I've worked for years in libraries where we'll have some patrons that come in that might be homeless, and they're staying there in the library because it's hot out or cold out. They're not reading, they're not using any other resources except for the physical mechanism, which is fine, but it causes a real problem for the other members of the library. And we end up trying to do our good works and be inclusive, potentially driving off other folks that would otherwise be customers of the library. And I don't mean to suggest that there is a common answer to that. It is one that requires an active conversation between the library leadership and the city's leadership in this case, and the community. What I would throw out there, though, too, is that there are other resources that we've been carrying forward, including the Nevada Career Explorer as an example. If we're going to operate as a social agency, then let's reach out to other social agencies that perhaps might be more appropriate, that are doing workforce development or social work in general with the communities. And if we can co-locate them in the same building, much as we're doing in Las Vegas, across the Las Vegas Clark County Library District, and many of the other libraries in the area, where the one-stop shops for people looking for jobs. In other words, they're in the library, so someone coming in can access those resources without feeling stigmatized. Oh, they're going to the unemployment office, or, they're going to some other social service. So I think there is an answer. There's a path that the agencies involved working together can strike that balance where we can be a positive force.
Just briefly, in the libraries that you've served, have you had much to do in this regard, or is it more your broader involvement?
I've certainly had a fair amount to do in that regard, and some of it has been negative and some of it has been positive. I mean, some of it is, well, we're a walled garden and people are paying to be here, and so I'm sorry, you're not allowed. We're not that kind of a library, which is heartbreaking and terrible to do. On the other hand, working actively with the other libraries that are in the area so that we can figure out how best to meet those needs. Because at the end of the day, the librarian and the library staff, which honestly anyone in the library that works for the library is seen as a librarian. I think we can agree on that. They are the ultimate connectors, right? So if we're part of the culture of contempt, if someone coming into our space triggers that, oh, they're homeless, like it's some sort of a disease that I might catch if I get too close and I pretend that they're not there, then the problem grows. It can drive off other people. They don't get the help that they're needing. But at the same time, if we are familiar with the other agencies that we might be able to connect them with to get them the help, rather than simply calling the police and encouraging them to move on, instead bridging them into whatever help it is that they might need. The library is there for everyone. I would say fundamentally, though, it's a conversation with the library board itself and the county or the city municipality leadership to figure out what that role is. Is the library purely a social service in the sense of being a homeless shelter? Is it a library? Is it a combination? What is it? And if it's one way or the other, are there funds to help us do that work?
Okay.
Or is it just an overflow? So I don't know, too much of an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to sit here and fill the remainder of this out, but I don't intend to prevent anyone else from coming up.
Thank you very much for your question.
And if I could just make the observation, I'm thrilled. Thank you all for coming out today. This bodes well. If folks will come out on a Friday night to listen to interviews of library directors or potential directors.
Friday.
It's really quite exciting.
Friday. Oops, turned it off.
It off? Well, that was intentional. Let me just preface by saying I'm a retired academic librarian. And before I finished library school, I worked in a public library. So I was wondering, what is it about the public library that is attracting you? Because you're serving very different demographics. The issues are very different. So Mr. Colgrove, Ms. Bush, I know that both of you come from an academic background, and I know you've worked in the public library. So let me just address the both of you, because I'd like to hear why the change. Oh, I'm sorry, Victoria Lum.
Thank you for your question. I did work for the Los Angeles Public Library for a period of time, and the best answer I can give you is librarians are librarians, no matter what your patron type is. And often in higher education, as you know, we have public space as well. So we have a lot of the same issues that you have been talking about today. We have public coming in to use the computers. We have people that are homeless coming into the library, just as we've just spoken about, mental health challenges. I think what is most attractive about making a transition is the focus on community as a whole. Because when you're serving as an academic librarian, as you know, it's just to support the curriculum and the pedagogy of the faculty that are there. So it's very kind of one lane, so to speak. You have to serve that population. And in a public library, it's just so much more diverse and broad, the ways that you can go and provide information and programming and services. And it's attractive.
Ready for a change?
Yes, I am. You know, and probably some of it comes from my arts administrative years. I really love the arts, obviously, because I'm at CalArts. But I'd like to have the opportunity to embrace that in a broader way with the whole community and not just for, as I say, the curriculum that's being offered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Lau. Todd Colgrove, for the record. I spoke to this in some length earlier. I think in my case, it is the public library is all about making a difference, right? Not to suggest that the academic library doesn't make a difference. It does in a very different way. To give you an example of what I mean, one of my board members on the State Council of Libraries and Literacy that is from the prison industry schooled me on the importance of libraries a while back. When she pointed out, she asked me, or actually she pointed out that if a child isn't reading at grade level by the time they're in the third grade, the chances that they're going to become a long-term resident of the prison industry go through the roof. So much so that that is how she and her colleagues forecast how many beds they're going to need in prisons in 30 years. The academic library isn't addressing that problem. The public library is and does on a daily basis. They're having a very real impact. That's one small way, right? And so it's critically important that that work continues, that it gets better, that it does an even better job. We're not trying to replace the role of public schools, but when the kids come into the story time and they get engaged, they discover a world that will lead them as they grow up. And what I would say is that in a real sense, what libraries have been doing now for the past 30 years is figuring out what it means to be a library in the 21st century. And as a recovering academic myself, I have the greatest respect for the work that goes on there, but they're still largely rooted in traditional librarianship, when really what we're doing is we're rediscovering, reimagining librarianship. In fact, if you're familiar with Dave Lankas's work, The Atlas of New Librarianship, talking and speaking specifically to how we do this. Again, thank you for your service in the academic library. If you haven't operated in that environment, it is incredible service in its own right. It's an incredible work and an incredibly teeny amount of thanks that come back. You don't get the joy that you see on the service desk here, but it's rewarding nonetheless. I hope that speaks to the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Did any other members of the public wish to ask a question?
Ask us something.
We could ask you questions.
Is that fair,
If you have a second question, you can ask a second.
Yay.
Yeah.
There he comes.
And if you could go ahead and state your name for the record.
Yeah, we're leaving it.
As long as the light is green, it's on.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, green is go, red is stop? Oh, okay, well, my name is Tommy Hughes. I guess I can write while I'm talking. I'm not good at multitasking, though. We've all been to restaurants that have a sign, no shirt, no shoes, no service. Is there anything that public libraries can have? I mean, obviously, no smoking, no drinking alcoholic beverages.
That's, the board sets that. The
Okay.
board, the library board would set those rules.
Okay.
Yeah, and they could,
So what are the rules? So Amanda. Oh, do you want to answer that? So I come in, well, probably not me, but possibly, wildly intoxicated, and what happens?
A person that's wildly intoxicated is not a safe person to have in the library with the other patrons. And so that will require action, asking the person to leave, and if they would not leave, then calling the appropriate parties to assist them in leaving.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
In fact, I'll chime in to Todd Colgrove for the record. That happened to us just last week, just down the street, right? It's a fairly regular occurrence, and it's something that we just resolve. I'm going to just push back a little bit on the concept of these are just rules that the board makes and the rest of us carry them out. It's absolutely a conversation between the library leadership and the board. And in general, in my experience with libraries, we have a real love of policy and rules, and I'll show you binders full of all the rules of the things that we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do them. But generally, when the emergency comes up, that's not what you're looking at, right? So my fundamental argument is that there's a reason why we hire human beings to serve in the library and not robots. If it were as simple as just writing a list of rules, we could program a robot to do it. Instead, we need individuals that are working in the library with their heart, that are working as part of this conversation with leadership, to broker that as appropriate back to the library board and county leadership as need be. I'm sure that our deputy district attorney has regularly fielded questions from the acting director and sorting these things out. It's a conversation, and we can do this, right? If there's a general agreement that we can allow someone to be drunk and intoxicated in the library, what are the rules under which that can operate or not, you know? I hope is that speaking to the question?
yeah, and I suppose there needs to be, well, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we've got a ton of homeless people in this community, a ton. And of course, if you live in a motel,
Right.
you're considered homeless. Homeless doesn't mean just living in your car or under a tree. And does the board, I guess this is a board question, does the board have any policies? I mean, if someone comes in and they haven't had a bath for a month and, you know, what happens? What are your instructions to staff of the library? Because you're not an advisory board, you're an administrative board, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll field that question. So it is our policy and the policy of the Carson City Library to be as inclusive as we possibly can be. Anybody that comes through our doors that's looking for services or anything like that, insofar as what the library provides, they're going to receive those services. To your point about, you know, potential disruptive behavior or anything like that, we have in place policies to refer those individuals to services that they can get that are outside of the library. But as I said, it's provided that there's not a disruption. Our goal is to serve everybody in the community.
Yeah, it would have to really probably, that's the disruption. It has to rise to the level that it truly is disrupting the, so like someone throwing something or, you know, yelling could be, it depends on, you know, although yelling, it depends on how loud, you know, what, you know, different people call yelling, speaking loud. Yeah, so things vary. And also the other thing, it's probably really good that laws or rules aren't just made up just randomly before there's a problem, because then there'd be a long list of rules and they'd be keeping lots of people out of the library, not just, you know, people that are just disrupting it, you know. So libraries want, you want to have people coming into the library. We want to help as many people as we can. And as long as people, you know, it's a public place and everybody has to get along. And mostly, I think, even people that might be homeless or they usually want to follow those rules too because they really want to be there.
May I add something? Is that
Of course, oh, of course, please do.
I just want to reframe this for a moment and offer that for my creative leave, I went on an RV trip. I think I shared that with some people for 3 or 4 months. And technically, you could say I was homeless during that time. I have a master's degree. I'm educated. And I went to RV parks and we parked off the grid. And also, I have known people that are very well educated, that have long and illustrious careers, and have had one misfortune in their life and lost their health care, lost their house, gone into foreclosure, and the job market can be really tight at times. And so then they find themselves in a really tenuous situation. So when you talk about homeless, I think oftentimes it's framed in a negative light. And obviously there are people that kind of fit that profile at times that are, I think, challenging for people who are running libraries. But I think we have to be careful when we talk about homeless as a general term. Because there's a lot of people that end up in that circumstances for various reasons. Yeah.
Homeless, some of the people that I know and serve in my community, they're families and they're homeless.
Yeah.
So they come to the library and they're there with their young kids who are getting library services. You know, the kids are too young to be by themselves, so they have to be in the library with their kids. That's one example. There's lots of examples of good reasons why they might be there. And for the most part, it's nobody else's business. And why they're in the library, until they cause a problem that is disruptive.
Well, and again, it's tricky. I mean, from my part, I want to make sure that the folks that are using the library are using the library services. And it's a conversation with the board to see if that one of those services is to keep them from freezing in the winter or in the summer. Because another part of the question that it's too easy for us to ignore is if they're not using library services, or even if they are using library services, is there a line at which we get up and they're driving out other potential customers of the library, right? Because what I want to work with these folks that might be homeless, that might be unemployed, and connect them with resources available throughout the municipality to help them solve that, to connect them with resources the library provides, including career databases like the workforce development tools that we've got, any of the resources that we have within the library with online programs, and programs like the MT1 that started here that is still changing lives to this day, by the way, in the prison industries. That's our most highest and best use in the library. It's easy for us to say, well, everyone belongs there, and unless they're going to be too loud and cause a nuisance, then they're supposed to be there. It's a conversation that we have to figure out, where does this fit? It's not a one size fits all. Sorry, yes.
What's MT1?
Well, it was the manufacturing technology certification program that the Carson Library spearheaded 6 to 10 years ago?
4.
Was it more
4,
recent
yeah, a
than that?
little over 4 years ago.
It's basically a program that someone could go through and get tooled up to be able to get hired by Tesla or any of these new companies that are coming in. Actually, Diane, you may want to speak to that in some detail.
Just a quick, Manufacturing Technician 1, it's a certification program, nationally certified. It's entry level into the manufacturing environment. And a number of the manufacturers in this area, including Tesla, recognize the certification, and the library has been an alternate path for learners to get an MT1 certification. The program's also at WNC and other locations, but that's part of the workforce development that he's.
So it's online at the library?
It's an online program, however, it's not a free program. We do have scholarships or you can go through the program at WNC at regular college costs.
And it's a similar sort of thing, that your library here spearheaded that program, and it continues to change lives today. Similar programs that are currently underway with the Nevada Career Explorer that you're offering. An example, right now Nevada, not just Nevada, but large parts of the United States is facing a huge crisis with diabetes and folks that have lost kidney function and they need to have dialysis done. And we can't get enough dialysis technicians into the pipeline to be able to hire them. Right now, there's one program that enables someone in Nevada to get certified as a dialysis technician, and it's in community college in Las Vegas, right? But and it's a 6-week program, but by connecting the social agencies, like we're working with workforce development in the state, if you come in and you work with the Nevada Career Explorer, and it shows that you've got, and you lean in this direction, that you might fit well within this dialysis technician, the program that's being fleshed out right now is you can pick up a virtual reality headset, try it on for a couple of minutes and see if that doesn't seem scary or make you want to pass out, which it would me. But if that seems like it's the fit for you, then again, the librarian can hook you up with the one-stop career centers. They'll even get your bus fare down to the place so that you can get in this program. 6 weeks later, you come out and you're one of the favorite things that we like to talk about, a tax-paying citizen, because now you went from zero in terms of salary to, I think their starting salary is about $50,000 a year, which is remarkable. If that were available to me, I probably would never have become a librarian. But it's the kind of thing that we should be doing. When we're at our highest and best, we're connecting our public agencies together with the information resources we have in the library, not just saying, I'll tolerate you or I feel sorry for you.
I don't think that's only what libraries are probably doing, though.
Yes.
I mean, because I would say a lot of people are using the internet, and that's life-saving for them as well.
It absolutely is.
And it's people's only access to, and a lot of
And
people's
you're
only
right, please, I
access.
did not mean to disparage in any way the work that other public libraries
No,
are
I
doing.
mean, I think that there's a lot of things that library do, just the engagement, the connection. I think that it's actually good for the whole
For the
community
infrastructure.
to go to a place where they see everybody in the community. If your community, it is a bigger problem than libraries. If your community has homeless people in the community, where else but a community library? That makes sense that they would be in a community library. The answer is to get rid of homelessness in your community.
Right. And we're doing our darndest to make a dent in
Yeah.
that. And that's actually, I would say, the book that we've danced around a bit earlier is called Palaces for the People, which is what Andrew Carnegie referred to when he was kickstarting all the public libraries around the country. And his thought process was that we need to see the nobility in each and every one of our citizens, and the public library is the mechanism by which that can happen. I'll bet you have a copy on the shelf. I know you have a copy in the ebook version. And if you don't, go touch bases with me down the street at the State Library. I'd be happy to hook you up. Because really, the author is one of these academics, a sociologist, that was actually studying the difference and the impact of having a social infrastructure, the fabric like you have in a library where you can connect with email and you talk with others. He started with an example in Chicago in the early 2000s when we had the rolling power outages and the heat waves, and people were literally, dropping dead by the hundreds. And he was comparing the difference between communities that were financially well off, right? They lived in nice divisions, but they didn't have public libraries or sidewalks or areas where people got together and learned to care for one another. Whereas the poor communities that had the public library and those networks, they survived the heat waves much better than the more affluent neighborhoods that just sort of hunkered down in their silos. And the rest of the book talks in some depth about how important this social infrastructure is, whether it's public parks or the public library, how important that is in our society today. So again, there I am again, a librarian trying to get you to read another book. My apologies. but-
You can tell by how robust this discussion has been that
Yes.
obviously it's on the front end of the challenges and issues that we talk about quite often in librarianship. And, we all have, I think, the same heart as far as approaching this problem with compassion and finding the best way forward for the community. I'm going to agree with both of you, but Gail, you were talking about the internet, and I absolutely believe that that is also valuable. So when you're just talking about homeless people or people that need other resources, it is a community effort, as you were saying. It's partnering with all of the social services, all the other nonprofits. As someone that was the vice president of a nonprofit in Orlando, which is a big city, and also in Salt Lake City, we had students that graduated out of foster care, never got adopted, that we scholarshiped in our ballet studio, and that we had to work with all of the social entities, social workers and law enforcement. They had criminal backgrounds. In fact, 4 of our dancers had to get clearance from the governor to perform in the Olympics because they had criminal backgrounds and they couldn't pass the security check. But in that way, we partnered with the Salt Lake Library, and the kids got to perform in the library. And so it takes a village, I guess is what we're all saying. And a lot of people look at the library because, it's very visible. You see the people there. And people are asking, that's my library too. I want to feel safe going there. And yes, it is your library, but it's in the partnerships together with all of the other nonprofits and agencies that we will be the most effective together as a city to tackle this.
What segment of the population do you think is in critical need of library services?
Wow. Sorry, I'm ready to jump.
We talked, I have an opinion on that. Do you want?
I mean,
ahead.
My opinion was, reading the strategic plan, is that the median age is actually going up in Carson City. And one group that I think needs to be focused on more is the senior population and partnering with them more. As I was sharing with my colleagues, I'm staying with friends here in town during the interview, Rich and Mary Redderer, and Mary is a former college president. She's really active in the Elks Lodge. They volunteer. They have the energy of the Energizer Bunny. I mean, they're all over town and contributing there to community in ways that is just really phenomenal. And I know that the Friends of the Library is a wonderful organization, and everybody is very engaged. And if we could continue to engage the senior population in the library with every program that we have, I don't know, thinking outside of the box, maybe docents in the library. And it's a crazy idea, but ways to make them feel, again, as if it's their library too, and what happens there matters to them. So yes, that's the population that I think needs to be focused on.
I mean, it's nationally, our country's population is aging, so I think all libraries do feel like they need to address that issue. But I wouldn't want to, I think, I want a library that really welcomes and has all ages really using it. So I want to have lots of vibrant programs for seniors. I want to have lots of vibrant programs for teens and for kids as well, young kids. For one thing, I think if we want to think about the library 50 years from now, we really need to make sure we're building future library users. So that's why you'd really want the kids and the teens, because especially your teens won't be long before they're taxpayers. And so that you need to look for, really want teens to see libraries as being an important part of their life. And intergenerational programs would be a great way to bring in both seniors and teens
That's a great
and
idea.
young people.
And I'd jump in and say, of course, my knee jerk, like that of my colleagues, would be everyone needs the library the most, right? But really, the answer to that question is deeply local.
It is.
It's
true.
local to each community, to each library, and where it's at. I would say if I were giving a general answer, I would say generally, the people that need the library the most are the people that think the library was made obsolete because books are electronic and everything is on the internet. And that, I hate to say it, I'm a member of that demographic. Folks 45 years and older a lot of us are laboring under that illusion. And kids that are younger, I don't know if that's the case here in Carson, but kids that are younger seem to not be at all shy about engaging with the library and its resources, whereas those of us in a, sorry.
I was going to agree, exactly what you said. And what you hear a lot, it's you want to look to see who's not in the room. And the people that aren't here are the people that need it the most, probably.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're saying.
If I were going to prioritize one group, though, it is, again, it's what you're already doing. It is anyone that's actively in that space of wanting to innovate or innovating in entrepreneurial action because you're already tooled up for it. Between the Adams Hub and the library makerspace proper, that's just an engine that is changing lives on a daily basis, I have no doubt. So that's easy. You can keep that crank turning. Sorry, easy is maybe not the right word, but.
And you talked about if you couldn't read by the third grade. And I went from reading Look Jane, See Spot Run in a public school in Van Nuys, California in the second grade.
Right.
That was a couple of semesters ago. And I got enrolled in Our Lady of the Valley in South Orange, New Jersey. And the sisters said, Tommy, it's your turn to read now. Silence. Tommy, you can read. Silence. Tommy, do you know where we are? I said, sister, I don't know what any of these words are. They were words 8 feet long, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did the second grade all over again. But they taught me this thing called phonics, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the Catholic schools, well, they taught phonics. They said, you know, you see a big word, relationship, you break it down into little syllables, relationship. Then you put, relationship, simple.
Right.
Since then, from that day forward, I became an avid reader.
Well done, yeah.
Yeah. And I had a stepfather who wouldn't accept anything less than a C, but really preferred A's. My sister got those, I didn't. Anyway.
Right.
But reading is so important, and you hear talk about the internet and social media. That just doesn't get it. I mean, Kindle, I know a lot of people like Kindles, but I like a book that I can mark in the margins and this kind of thing. And I think libraries are so incredibly important because books that I get, I don't go to the library for, I purchase them, but not everyone can purchase the books that I purchase, you know.
You know, your story really speaks personally to me because my son had speech delay, and we went to the public library and borrowed the Hooked on Phonics book.
Really?
And and he was so far behind, and they took him out of class to read every day. And he's 26 now. He's my avid reader. In middle school, he wanted to read The Count of Monte Cristo, and that was his favorite book. Right. He's a college graduate, but yes, he started out just as you just said, and if it wasn't for the library at the time, I couldn't afford that book. And they had Hooked on Phonics. They were very expensive, and so it was. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah. That was nice.
And as you were sharing that story, I have all of the impact that reading has had in your life. Imagine if that were taken away. And I have to put in a shameless plug here for the Talking Books library program that we run down the street out of the State Library with support, actually, of the trustees have regularly volunteered. But with the support of the Library of Congress, we provide audiobooks to anyone that can't, they're either blind or they're so physically disabled they can no longer hold a book. So an example of that is, I mean, if you lost your ability to read, the world around you starts to close in and you're just sitting here in this spot. This program will provide the reader and any book that you want. In fact, you can have 100 of them if you want, and it just comes to you in the mail and it goes back the same way. So if you know anyone that is losing their eyesight or is physically disabled, unable to hold a book, a librarian can certify them. They don't have to go to the doctor. We'll be glad to get them on the program, and it will change their lives. I see that on a regular basis. So if you weren't familiar with that or you know someone that could benefit from it, definitely touch bases with your library. They'll get you set up.
And do most books have an audio component?
They do, because the state libraries across the country we're all this one giant team, right? Sort of like Voltron, where we were all working together to record the audiobooks. Because Congress, the motto of the program is that all may read. So this is one of the few, sorry, I shouldn't be cynical, but it's a piece of legislation that does really good on a daily basis from the Congress. What they did is they said, if you're an author, you have the copyright to that book. But the Talking Books program has the right to record a copy of it without paying you. And they're going to share it with limitation to just the people that, are visually disabled or unable to hold a book. And so every state library is actively involved with their own version of the Talking Books program. Down the street at the state library, we've got 5 full-time staff working with a staff of at least 16 volunteers that are actively focusing on books that are Nevada-specific books that are published here, and they record audio versions of that to share with every other state library. So the short answer is any book that's out there, you can get a copy of it.
Someone that qualifies can get a copy of it.
Someone that qualifies, yes, thank you.
They have to qualify.
Yeah. Libraries, I just wanted to say, I think libraries address our need for stories in a lot of other ways besides books in these days. Because I think that humans have a need for stories. And, there's books, there's movies and TV shows that are circulated, but board games, video games, those are all stories. And so I think it's possible some people are reading less books, but they're getting as many stories as, probably more stories. They're getting a lot of stories from these other avenues.
I was talking with one woman that just started the program 2 weeks ago, and it's like her entire world was opening up. She was going on about, and she read this book. She heard the book, right? That was
reading.
Yeah, exactly, and paid attention to it. And at first, it was like, I don't know, the Gobi Desert. I don't know anything about that. And then she was telling me about how she was talking to her girlfriends and telling them all these stories. It's the kind of life she used to have, where she would read and have vibrant, interesting things. It's not just books; it's also magazines and so on. So,
Young man, you used the word Voltran.
Voltran, yes.
What in the world is that?
Yes, you could perhaps speak to that.
You can tell I'm from the dark ages.
Was an early type of Transformers, was it? Or it was a type of superhero robot, and correct me when I've got it wrong, but there was at least a half dozen of them that could snap together and form this super big, mega, winning robot.
He
Does
was
that make
the
sense?
predecessor to the Power Rangers, yes.
Power Rangers,
Oh, good.
thank you.
So,
Oh, good. See, it's not just
That's exactly right.
so
your gangster homie in the hood. Yeah.
Really is this concept, though, and that is what the library does. We all sort of snap together to form this amazing, much more impactful than any one of us is on our own kind of thing. And that's, what we're talking about up here even, isn't it?
And board, I'm sorry for taking up all this time because there's probably tons of people back there that want to.
Probably
I
come
did
if they wanted
want
to.
to make sure that there might be any other questions or anything
Yeah,
like
got
that.
another one.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And please state your name for the record.
My name is Olivia Flewellen, and I work at FISH. I am the program coordinator for pretty much majority of the services that you guys were referring to earlier when we're talking about homeless individuals.
Yes.
So I do appreciate that conversation, given that we are currently seeing an average of 204 new homeless individuals in Carson City a month.
Wow.
So it is a very important question, and I appreciate the discussion around involving other agencies and how it needs to be as a community, because they generally are seen as a nuisance, and even the beginning of the discussion sounded very much like, well, how do we deal with them? Well, how do we deal with anybody that's loud and disruptive? It doesn't matter if they're homeless. But the question that I really wanted to know is, why Carson City?
If I can jump, I have to jump in on that too. Sorry, because I'm a proud person that goes back to, again, my family goes back in this neck of the woods to before it was a state. Well, first off, the area is amazing. This is where I want to have an impact. And I can honestly say, from having seen it from the inside out and the outside in, that the Carson Library, this library, is the most critical path library in the state for other libraries around the state, to the state library proper, and in terms of leading other libraries nationwide with a lot of this progress. This team has already been doing lots of this work over the course of the last 10 years. We're talking about the MT1, the Makerspace, a variety of things that they've been leading the charge with. We can take that further, and it's only here. Sorry if I jumped the gun. I think it's critical path. This hire is critical path to the future of the state. It's critical path to the future of libraries within the state, and it's critical path nationally for librarianship. So if not here, where?
You go ahead.
Well, I think you're asking why we want to come to Carson City. I grew up in Las Vegas, and so I traveled around the state a lot. I'm not sure whether other classmates did as much traveling up here as I did. I was in 4-H. I came up here all the time. We came up in cattle carts and to go to 4-H camp at Lake Tahoe. And I went other places to UNR a lot. My mother had a boyfriend that worked at UNR, so I was up there a lot. So I'm familiar with the plates, this area. I also, looking at what this library is, it's a lot like the library I'm currently at in terms of the services they offer. And I've worked at a lot of different places besides Las Vegas. I did work there. I worked in, I was a library consultant at a regional library system in Appalachian, Ohio. So I've lived in a lot of different kinds of communities, and in some ways, New Hampshire, where I work now, it doesn't look at all like here. But some of the people are kind of similar in some ways. We got libertarians, we have free staters, and that's where everybody wants to move to start their own plates. And we have homeless, of course, and there's no taxes. That's another real similarity with New Hampshire and Nevada. So there's there's lots of those little things, lots of them. It's amazing things you could find. But I have friends that live here as well. So it seems like in some ways I feel like I'm more coming home here. I have a brother that lives in Nevada. It's like home.
It is home.
All right. Why do I want to work for the library here? I have a deep appreciation for this community. I'm not from here, so that's something, and I very much value the history that my colleagues have here. But I have, if you've noticed my resume, if you've read it, I've moved a lot in my life, and I've taken pieces of each community that I've lived in and brought that forward to the next. And I think sometimes it helps to have new eyes on old problems, to try to find different solutions and to try to marry the two. So to build upon the foundation that's already here and to honor the values of the community and then find a way forward that maybe wasn't visible to people that are, you know how you get right in the middle of a problem and sometimes you miss the obvious. And I enjoy doing that. I enjoy problem solving and thinking out of the box. Also, on a personal note, I travel here quite a bit. My partner, he spent every summer here as a child. His father taught at UNR. He was a lawyer from New York in their judicial college. And since we've been together, we come here as much as we can. We have family and friends here, go up 395, all the way past Ridgecrest, up through Mammoth, and come this way. And I'm just enamored with not only the geology and the geography of this beautiful place, the openness of it. I'm a writer as well, and I'm a nature writer. So areas like Carson City really speak to my heart. And I feel most productive in this kind of environment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. With that, it is 7 p.m. By my watch. So the board is going to take a brief recess, and then we will reconvene. So thank you all very much. I will go ahead and reconvene the meeting of the Library Board of Trustees. So now we have the opportunity to continue with item 3A, discussion and possible action regarding the selection of a new library director. So if anybody would like to open discussion.
Are we gonna map out our scores?
So I believe we're having some technical difficulties with the.
Yeah, I have this fabulous spreadsheet,
Right.
but it won't
Can't see
project. I can record anything that you have. Unfortunately, we don't have that, but I don't know.
So instead,
At your pleasure.
TVs are not correct.
Yeah, for whatever reason, the monitors or TVs are
You
not
wanna
coming up.
just,
so let's, I think one of the easiest ways that we can go is ranking the
right,
the candidates.
so we
So-
usually do the scores.
Let's see. I'm just building a quick little table.
Jeremy's gonna keep track, he's our numbers guy. You can put it in there too. Do you just wanna have Diane do it?
Yeah, in that case, I'll just have you take the record. Because that way it's a spreadsheet and it's much easier. My thought is, do we want to just rank?
Yeah, so by the structure of the scoring matrix, read off of all of our scores, give them to you. Oh, I gotta add this.
I can take that trustee by trustee and
Okay.
record your scores on here. And sorry, it can't project.
And then I have trustee Cranston's scores.
Yeah, if you want to just read those off for me, I would appreciate it.
Okay, I will. Are you ready?
I'm
Okay.
ready.
So for Mr. Colgrove, it was a 38.
Got it?
Ms. Bush, 31. Ms. Zachariah, 27.
Okay. Next.
Go ahead and read yours.
For mine, Mr. Colgrove, 39. Ms. Bush, 30. Ms. Zachariah, 20.
Why are mine so much higher than yours? Do you wanna go next? Okay. Okay, I'll go next. All right, so Mr. Colgrove, I have 42. Miss Bush, I have 37. And Miss Zachariah, I have 34.
I'm sorry, the last one was 34?
34?
Thank you.
For Mr. Colgrove, I have 45. For Ms. Bush, I have 32. For Ms. Zachariah, I have 33. What, now you've lost that too?
I'm sorry, I was trying something in my ear.
Oh,
You did? Yay, okay, it may have been operator error, sorry. So I had the first score, I'm sorry, can you give me your next two, please?
for Ms. Bush, it was 32 because my
Okay.
fault, I didn't take any notes on one of her questions, so it kind of lowered the number of scores that I had. And for Zachariah, it was 33.
Okay,
You get them all?
I did, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm last. Okay. For Mr. Colgrove, I have 43. For Miss Bush, I have 36. And for Miss Zachariah, I have 30.
Okay.
So as we can see, we have the aggregate scores in column H there. Is there any discussion on, outside of the scoring rubric, Any thoughts?
I don't have any. I was just going to say that it, again, was a tough decision with the candidates were all really great. So that's all I have.
So should I read the scores, or I guess, I don't know, for trustee Cranston?
Oh, yes,
The aggregate
please.
scores. So the totals for Mr. Colgrove, 207, Ms. Bush, 166, Ms. Zachariah, 144.
Sound good.
And I believe we're formulating a motion currently.
Okay, I move to formally offer a position to Mr. Colgrove. A member of the board will present a formal offer to Mr. Colgrove, and if he chooses not to accept, then a contingency to offer Ms. Bush the position. And a board member will present a formal offer in that event as well.
Second?
Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ms. Balderson, seconded. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries. With that, we can move on to item 4, public comment. If any members of the public wish to address the Library Board of Trustees, now would be the time. I will note that any public comment can be limited to 5 minutes. Seeing none forthcoming, we can move on to item 5, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.